quick intro. Thanks. Steve Setka is one of our members here at Launch Co-working, and excited to have him on our launch talk today, leading a discussion about logistics and various disruptions that are occurring as a result of COVID, and what we can do to mitigate those disruptions and plan for the future. So with that, I'll pass it right over to Steve. Steve, you take it from here.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate it. Oh, I'm just jumping through to make sure my slides are working. Thanks for having me, and thanks for those who have joined the call. I'm sharing two screens at the moment, or one screen, but I have two screens myself, so I can't necessarily see. Oh, there we go. I can see who's on the call. And a few of them, a couple customers, a couple other InXpress franchisees, a couple other people that'll join us today. If you have any questions, I have the chat box open. You can chime in with a question on the chat box, and you can ask me whatever you feel is necessary in regards to what I'll be talking about today, which is kind of the disruption of ground and air parcels throughout this COVID-19 world that we're living in right now. So let's get started, and ask me questions whenever you feel necessary. So I made this presentation for the World Trade Center Winnipeg, and I've adapted it a little bit, Jason, for what I'm doing and to our guests. So bear with me, but we're going to talk a little bit about InXpress. We're going to talk a little bit about the networks and shipping and how they're being affected these days, uncertainty in the future, and what sort of logistics and freight situation we believe we're coming into in the future as we hear about the new normal. Per se, there's definitely going to be a new normal in the way that international trade is working. Of course, the industry is very essential, and the frontline workers in the transportation industries are getting some great gratitude at the moment, and we're showing every bit of appreciation that we can, because our business definitely relies on these frontline workers in the industry in order to keep moving. So as an extension of that industry, we're very grateful as well. So changes in the couriers and the postal services as well. Service levels and options for businesses and consumers at the moment, considering the fact that a lot of shipping is going to homes these days, right? Even with businesses shipping to residentials, there's different challenges and different issues that we have to consider. And then lastly, we'll talk about the difference in types of companies that you can work with as your freight and logistics provider. As a direct carrier shipping company, such as any of the couriers or freight companies that we'll speak of later on in the presentation, or working with a third-party logistics or a reseller network, which is what we do with InXpress. So moving on here, a little bit to do with InXpress. For those of you who don't know all that much about what we do and who we are, we're a global logistics company that specializes in international small parcel shipping, domestic small parcel shipping, and LTL freight, anything that is palletized freight going around Canada or the US, that would be. Specifically right now, a lot of our focus has to do with international, with all the COVID stuff happening and all the need for masks and safety equipment around the world. It's one of the biggest challenges that we're encountering and facing at the moment. So our company's been around for 20 years. There's over 350 offices around the world in 15 different countries. And our targets are small businesses who focus on smaller volumes of international shipping and pallet freight. And thank you to a couple of the new individuals who've joined us who have wanted to learn a little bit more about this industry. So you're going to have some carrier options when you're shipping, right? And I put these carrier options on this slide in front of us with a cool little, I see Frederick has joined us, and this is something that's probably pretty relevant to what he's doing at the moment. A little bit of a connection in the airline industry, but this is what the world is changing and moving into, right? We've put the three carriers on this slide that will provide you with air shipments for sure. All three of them coming into different modifications as drones that we can see on the screen here that are advancing in the world of parcel shipments. Now, these are the three major international carriers, and there's a little bit of difference between the three of these as well too. So UPS and FedEx are companies we'll talk about along with DHL as well today, and the differences between all three of them and the adaptations that we've seen in the industry for international courier parcels over the last 6 to 8 weeks and what's going to be happening going forward. Now, the difference between the three companies we're going to look at here in this slide is the fact that UPS and FedEx provide a domestic service within Canada. Specifically, we'll speak Canada during this presentation. And DHL does not do domestic Canada shipping. So DHL is who we represent as an international small parcel reseller, and they only do international import and export shipments. There's obviously a lot of other carriers that get to in slides in a few minutes here, but these are the ones that we are going to focus today on in terms of international shipping and how it's been affected in the world these days. A little bit furthermore to what I just spoke about, the carriers that we'll focus on today. Now, there's a couple levels of parcel shippers and how they work, and I've lined them out in a line item style in front of your screen right now. So DHL, FedEx, and UPS being the biggest courier shipping companies in the world, DHL being only an international shipper doing imports and exports, FedEx and UPS doing both, plus the domestic market, and they all have their strengths in their different markets that they work in. The next line being Canpar, Loomis, and Purolator are the dominant courier shipping companies within Canada. The one that InXpress works with the most is Canpar as a domestic parcel shipping company, and they provide the services all over the country. Now, the challenge that the courier network would have specifically in this world that we're living in right now is that there's a lot of residential deliveries and a lot of residential shipments that are going out in the world right now, which is where Canada Post comes into play. So the next line talks about the post services. Canada Post, USPS, Sierra Courier is a Winnipeg-specific courier for those who are in Winnipeg, who are kind of managing that side of the parcel industry. Post, these days, doing a lot of shipping to people's doors, right? Not having the residential surcharge is something that people see as an advantage. Another advantage to the postal system that people would think is that they're the national carrier, and it is the truth for sure, and they go everywhere around Canada, or USPS goes everywhere around the US, including PO boxes. That's definitely a great benefit to the post system, where there's a lot of people working at home or being at home, and not everyone lives in a city or lives in a town where they have an address to ship to. On the flip side, the couriers in Canada, specifically Canpar, Loomis, Purolator, that we'll talk a little bit more about today, do a lot more business to business in general, have a little bit of there's a mindset around those couriers that they're a little bit more expensive, which is definitely not the case. There's just specialties in regards to what each courier does and how they price their shipments. For example, Canada Post is quite inexpensive for small single packages going within Canada or potentially around the world. The couriers would specialize more in larger packages over 20 pounds in terms of giving you a competitive price, multi-piece shipments, providing tracking information and speed and efficiency. So there's definitely different advantages that every company would provide in the marketplace, and even more with what we're seeing in the world these days. Now, one thing I did not mention on these slides is Amazon. Amazon is definitely a large, massive provider of goods these days, one of the largest companies in the world that does have a shipping network that's not necessarily a huge yet, the shipping network of Amazon in Canada. So the last time that you saw a shipping truck in Canada that had an Amazon logo on the side, or your Amazon delivery package being delivered by an Amazon driver, it hasn't happened yet. So they all work together and they outsource each other's services in order to help each other out for what they are good at, which is fantastic. Moving forward here, what you can expect and the world that we're going to be looking at potentially going forward and currently. So I put a Shopify logo on this screen because of the fact that a lot of small businesses, non-essential businesses, and companies that still ship that don't have a storefront are going to rely on online shipping these days. So Shopify, being a Canadian supplier of shopping carts to integrate into your web store, that also works with the courier companies to deliver those products are very relevant these days and very necessary. What you're going to have to expect when you're shopping online and when you're converting your shipments and your purchases and receiving packages and your deliveries, whether that is specifically parcels or it is bigger freight, is that you're going to have delays in what you're doing. The stores that you're working with or buying from are going to be delayed in their shipping protocol, in their business protocol, in a variety of different ways that might delay your shipment even more than it already would. Talking about price fluctuations and international, that's a challenge enough as it is without all these restrictions that we're experiencing during COVID. Now we have all these other delays, restrictions, and limitations in our world that's delaying your packages and your products even more. One thing to note when you're buying stuff online or when you are shipping yourself out to a customer or a vendor is that you're going to experience delays based on the fact that there is a reduced capacity for shipping at the moment. What I mean there is that the infrastructure for moving packages, whether that's online orders, business to business shipments, or LTL freight and pallets, there's less trucks on the road. There's far less planes in the air at the moment. There's far less international infrastructure that is moving goods for companies that are shipping, but there's not less shipments. Therefore, there are significant delays in moving products, and they're sitting in warehouses, they're sitting in depots longer than they ever had, which affects the transit time that they're going to move and get to you or get to your customer. Also, with everybody working from home, the limited amounts of HR and people power that are working through terminals, working through systems, working on platforms, working on software is definitely limited. InXpress being a home-based company, and most of us that operate InXpress franchises in the world work from home or an office have not necessarily had to shift or change our service levels in regards to assisting and helping our customers. With the carriers specifically, you're going to see 2 to 3 hour delays on the phone to try and get in touch with someone to ask, is my shipment coming? Am I able to ship this? What's the price? Answer my questions and whatnot. So there could be a little bit of a value add with working with a company that's a third-party reseller such as InXpress in the world today. So pickups and deliveries, of course, are challenging in a world where social distancing and social isolations are occurring. So some of the procedures that companies have put into place are contactless pickup and contactless delivery. Signature requirements are being loosened, and the restrictions and regulations that you'll see in shipping and picking up and delivering your products will be changed. Again, causing some delays in the industry, causing some delays in the transit time, and causing some issues with moving packages. One of the issues that we've seen recently is the fact that a lot of businesses are closed, or a lot of businesses do not have their front door open, or there's a variety of reasons why a delivery person could not get to a pickup location or a delivery location, and we've been dealing with it for about 6 weeks. My business partner, Tom, on the call here can definitely relate to that because he's typically the one that deals with the shipment issues that we've been experiencing when it comes to pickups and delays. So handheld signatures, no signature requirements, transferring goods back and forth, wearing of masks are all new procedures that the drivers have come in to utilize to essentially get your products picked up and delivered to where they're going. Business closures has been a significant challenge that they've all encountered these days, and there's procedures that have been put into place for shipping products to businesses and back at the moment that we can talk a little bit about further offline if anybody would like to have a discussion about that. Currently, if you live in an apartment building or if you're in an office building or a closed space environment, a variety of industries or companies will not allow delivery drivers or any outside vendors to even come in, therefore causing more delays and more challenges in the industry to getting your packages to where they need to go and getting them delivered and picked up. Now, here's a good question that I get oftentimes, which is quite relevant at the moment when it comes to how should I ship my products if they're a small parcel specifically. And the question is, am I big enough or am I small enough, or do I have enough volume where it makes sense to work with either a post office or working with a courier network? As I said previously, there's advantages and disadvantages to working with both types of a shipping carrier. If you're a small vendor that doesn't ship very often and you travel around a lot and your packages you don't have a way to drop them off necessarily at a post office or at a terminal for courier, and it's the most cost effective, Canada Post is likely something that you might consider as a national carrier. If you have a business location that you're working out of, or you're home based and you are at home most of the time and you can rely on a pickup, or you want that extra value added service with extra tracking, with pickups and deliveries included, it might be a good time to look at a courier like Canpar, FedEx, UPS, DHL, companies that are carriers that are in the industry. What our discussions revolve around in regards to this with businesses and individuals that ship is what is the value of your time and what is the value of your energy? At the moment, if you're going to a post office, you're putting yourself at risk safety-wise by going to a place that has a variety of contact and a variety of individuals going to visit, which can be a challenge for a variety of people at the moment. Instead, having a driver coming to pick up a package at your door at your business might be something of value at the moment. Are the post offices or the courier terminals that I'm dropping off at or going to, are they open and are they close to me? Now, at the moment, Canada Post has not closed any locations, and they probably won't, being an essential service, especially now that the restrictions are loosening up. The terminals as well have not closed their locations, but they have restricted access to the public. Now, Canpar, specifically as a reseller of what we do, is located in Northwest Winnipeg, so it's not necessarily the most convenient to drive to, although there are other drop spots around the city that you can drop off your packages for the courier if you like. The next question to ask yourself, are my boxes heavy? Do I have multiple pieces? What sort of pricing structure do I need? Canada Post will give you a rate that provides you with one rate, and if you multiply those boxes, you're just multiplying the amount of boxes by that rate. So one box being $20, two boxes being $40, four boxes being $80. Couriers will offer you a multi-piece rate where they're providing you a better rate on multiple piece shipments instead of just doubling your rate when you're sending another package. If your packages as well are over 20 pounds, the prices you're going to get from Canada Post and the service are not as competitive anymore. One thing we spoke about already, shall I practice physical and social distancing and drive to a post office, or should I stay at home? So that's one advantage we've seen with our customers these days, not wanting to leave their house, specifically if they're elderly. Take advantage of a pickup from their house or a pickup from their business location. And one thing we've encouraged individuals to do these days is to provide a pickup area for customers of ours, for couriers to come pick up at. It might be outside, so they don't have to interact with the parcel driver. Customer that we have that does bath salts and bath soaps has taken advantage of this, where they put in front of their house a little bit of a shed where the courier can access only. They come and pick up her boxes, they go into the network, and they move efficiently, safely, at a very good price, and she did not have to even leave her door in order to get those shipments on their way for her customers, which is fantastic. Okay, this is a concept that is a little bit confusing. I shouldn't even preempt it that way. I should just explain it in simplistic terms. So when you're shipping, regardless of the package, if it's a parcel, if it's a pallet, or if it's a full truckload or a massive amount of volume, you're going to be charged on your shipment based on two different weights. So for example, there's actual weight and there's dimensional. If you have a box that is small and lightweight, it's likely to go as that weight of the package. But if that package is lightweight and a large box, takes up a lot more space. Therefore, the price that is going to be charged will be based on a higher weight, because of the size that that takes up in the network. So it's all based on a concept called density, that is a calculation that is placed on a box or on a shipment to see how much space that takes up in a truck or in an aircraft, which determines what your price will be for that shipment. I've done a few calculations on the screen there. Not something that I expect anybody to remember or calculate with their shipments. The idea is, if you have a box, it might get charged out based on the actual weight of the box, or it might get charged out based on the dimensions that that box is cubed in a dimensional weight variety instead, and it will cost you a little bit more. Constantly something that I'm answering is a question that why my box, it's only 5 pounds, weighs out at 30 pounds. And this is the answer that I have to provide. And usually I try to do it in a little bit of a humorous way. Doesn't always go down very well though. But something to keep into consideration when you're shipping. The different levels of service that you're going to experience when you're shipping are listed on your screen. Now we're limiting this to air and ground at the moment because that's where we've seen the biggest shifts and the biggest changes in the industry for us. As a reseller of both services, parcel air and parcel ground and trucking ground, we've seen challenges in both of these types of shipments that have caused us stress and caused us delays in the shipments that we have to relate to our customers. So when it comes to a parcel that you're shipping on ground or a pallet that you're shipping on ground, it's going to travel in a route that is based on lane structures, for example, from Winnipeg going to wherever it's going. Commonly a misconception is that if I send my shipment, for example, from Brandon to Edmonton, it's going to go on a truck directly from Brandon to Edmonton, which is not necessarily the case. What would happen is your pallet or your shipment would go from Brandon to Winnipeg, to Regina or Saskatoon, to Edmonton, adding an extra day of transit, which determines how long it's going to take for your shipment to get from one location to the next. Counteracting that would be if you needed to ship with speed, with a little bit higher of security and sense of knowing that your product is not moving for as long a period of time for safety, or if it needs to go to another country overseas, you're going to have to ship via air. But if a flight directly goes from Winnipeg to Toronto, for example, you could get a next day shipment. But if it's going from Toronto to Sudbury, it's not necessarily a place where you would have a commercial airline or commercial flight to get a next day shipment, which would add another day of transit. With DHL International and with the courier that we work with specifically, there's no faster method than going international air with a carrier anywhere around the world. Now, DHL being a company that only provides fast express shipping internationally would compete with carriers such as FedEx's Express Rates, UPS's Express Rates, and Canada Post Express. The difference between those systems is that DHL would provide a shipment that would go only express. All of their volume goes express, all of it goes quickly, getting in and out of their systems. Therefore, the rate structures that they would likely be able to put into place for you would be more competitive than FedEx Air, UPS Air, and Canada Post Air for the same level of service. One thing in terms of COVID-19 and the current infrastructure of shipments traveling around the world is the lack of commercial airlines that are traveling at the moment. We've had shipments come out of China for masks and for medical equipment coming to Canada recently that have been delayed significantly based on the fact that all the carriers coming out of China are backlogged 1 to 2 weeks on the freight that they have moving out of the country. On top of that, the export declarations have become more strict in China, for example, based on how you need to export these products for legitimacy purposes and safety for getting that product outside of China to the country of where it's going to. What you've probably noticed throughout the news and throughout watching Manitoban information and worldwide trade at the moment is that there's a variety of manufacturers that are changing their manufacturer structure at the moment to help produce products that are needed, such as medical equipment around the world. The challenge with that is that they're putting in place regulations, obviously, that have to be met in order to have legitimate products exiting that country, going to another country that they're importing them to. Which means that the declarations that that exporting company has to go through in order to move these products around the world, or even within Manitoba, is significant. So they can't send out rubbish masks to other countries that damages their reputation just because they want to help. That affects the courier industry, that affects the commercial airline industry that moves parcels, which delays, which causes a little bit of a ripple effect for products moving around the world, whether that's medical equipment, whether that's essential food, whether that's essential goods, whatever it might be, that we already have challenges with in terms of international trade because of the regulations that are already in place. So keep that in mind when you're doing international shipping at the moment. Be prepared, work with legitimate sources that you know that have the ability to provide proper import and export documentation to you when you're shipping products internationally. One thing that I have on the slides here as well, rural locations versus major hubs is going to affect how your service levels are going to operate and what prices you're going to get. Of course, sending a package from Germany to Churchill, Manitoba is going to be a lot more expensive and a lot slower than it would be sending from Germany to Winnipeg. Moving along here, we kind of spoke about the air parcel network already. There's a little bit of a photo that introduces it a little bit further and speaks a little bit more about the regulations that already exist in air parcels or air freight going around the world. An organization called IATA, which is International Air Transport Agency, that regulates international shipments and how they move around the world in terms of dangerous goods, in terms of different types of items, in terms of safely transporting items around the world. All commercial and freight carriers are under the umbrella of IATA and how they transport goods and how they transport people. And it's something that is not necessarily necessary to know as a consumer, but is important to understand the regulations as a small business that would be shipping products internationally, specifically overseas by air. Now, the difference that I spoke of a little bit earlier between an authorized reseller or a third-party logistics company and a direct carrier. So I want to make it very clear what an authorized reseller is, or a 3PL shipping company, and a direct carrier. As we've spoken about throughout this presentation already, we have carriers such as UPS, FedEx, DHL, Purolator, Canpar, and other carriers that do freight like Day & Ross and Vitran that you can work with directly. What we do with InXpress is an authorized reseller partner of those shipping companies, those direct carriers. So we provide a service in between the carriers and the customer in order to access potentially a better rate structure, a service person that you would have direct access to, and a representative to deal with your shipments and your customer service issues between yourself and the carrier. The process InXpress works under is to access carriers around the world to provide you with options from a larger volume perspective than you might have as an individual or a customer yourself of the direct carrier. There are advantages and disadvantages of working with third-party logistics carriers, companies, and compared to direct carriers. Although we believe that the access that you would have currently through COVID to a company such as InXpress or another authorized reseller might be a little bit more easily accessible than you would with a direct carrier. If you're working with DHL specifically at the moment directly, and your rep was not available or not in the same city, or you did not have a direct phone line to, you'd be waiting a long time in order to get your phone call answered to deal with the whereabouts of your shipment, whatever types of shipping that would be. Why would you select an authorized reseller instead of a carrier? The reasons that I spoke about. You have direct access. You might get a better price in regards to what you would get on your own. The service and pricing that you would receive could be more competitive. It depends on the volumes and the rates that you're already currently getting working with the carrier that you would like to work with. Sometimes authorized resellers and 3PLs have memberships that you would have to access to pay to use their service. With InXpress, there's no membership fee or upfront costs to work with our shipping carriers. All you would pay for is the freight that you'd move. Something we've already spoken about, we're getting to the near of the end of the presentation, is how do I decide during COVID, during regular normal operations, which carrier I should work with, which company is better or best, and there aren't necessarily any that are bad. One thing I would never do is talk trash about any other company that we would work against or a competitor. And is what Steve's saying at the moment legitimate and valid? How do we know that? Well, those are great questions to ask yourself, but I can answer and provide a little bit of information in regards to what you would consider when working with a different carrier. Do I have time on my side when I'm making a shipment? Parcel shipment, freight shipment, full truck shipment, ocean shipment? Yes, you can go a slower route. No, I need a bit more of an express route. What type of service do I require? It could come down to simply, do I like the DHL, Canpar, FedEx, whatever driver who delivers and picks up from my location? Is the post office close? Would I benefit from saving the time driving to a post office or having my parcels picked up themselves? Do I have tracking opportunities through those shipments, specifically the international shipments that would be moving right now with the delays and the challenges that are being experienced with the COVID isolation regulations? What sort of cost and how much is it in order to move my package from one place to another? And if you require an issue to be dealt with, how would that be dealt with in relation to working with any certain carrier, working with InXpress, or working with an authorized reseller? And COVID procedures, specifically what we've spoken about today, is something that we need to take into consideration when choosing our next logistics provider for our shipments. So we're moving into a little bit of a new normal at the moment. We're loosening up our regulations in our society, and we're changing how we will be operating our businesses going forward. So these are the questions that we've put together for our customers to determine how to do their shipping and how to move their products in the future and going forward. This is a little bit of a hire InXpress and shameless self-promotion call to action to see if we could benefit from this service just as much as we believe our customers could benefit from working with us. What is the price and how is the company operating? Who will provide me and my customer with the best experience? Does the carrier offer insurance and third-party insurance rates that would be competitive or less expensive that cover what we need in case of damages or losses? What are the surcharges like for certain COVID regulations that have come into place? Can we trust the COVID-19 infrastructure for this company or for the carrier that we are selecting or working with? How do I track my shipments? And if we have issues, can we resolve those issues in a way that are effective and speedy and don't take away our time from doing other things in our business? That is everything that I have, Jason, for my presentation today. I'd love it if you could open up the conversation and unmute everybody to ask some questions, or if anybody wants to pop them in the Zoom chat box. Thank you very much, Steve Setka from InXpress. Reach out and have a good time.
Great, Steve. Thanks so much. That was awesome. That was great insight in terms of the industry. I have a question. We'll kick things off. We've been in I'll frame it this way: is that all courier companies have a fuel surcharge.
Yep.
That they have sort of used for the last decade and a half as oil prices have continued to rise. We are in a negative price fuel economy here. I'm curious what your view is on what that impact on overall pricing is going to have as we go through the next 6 to 12 months. My own view on it is that it seems that we should be getting a relief on the fuel surcharge for sure. But is that being counteracted by the additional measures that COVID is challenging companies with?
That's a great question, Jason. Thank you for bringing that up. And it's definitely something that shippers take into consideration when they move their products What I've seen so far, of course, with the fuel prices being the way that you had mentioned, in terms of connecting that with the fuel surcharge with shipping, is that they have decreased somewhat, although the overall price has not decreased and somewhat increased in a variety of different ways. So I'll speak specifically to that point at the moment and what we've seen in terms of pricing overall. So the fuel surcharge has decreased, but surcharges for freight, surcharges for accessorial requirements, and the surcharges that are being put in place during COVID has been what's kind of equaled out that decrease in the fuel these days that people are struggling with in terms of prices. Within our company, we've received pricing surcharges that have come into play during COVID that are a lot more strict than they usually are, that have caused companies, or that have costed companies more than what they typically would, specifically in the air cargo industry, based on the lack of infrastructure to move all the freight that they have. Going forward with fuel surcharges, I've been reading about this and following this story daily to see what's been happening and following what's been occurring with oil and what will happen with fuel going forward. And I don't have necessarily a good estimate, and I'm not sure about what's going to happen in regards to these fuel surcharges. But what I do know is that they're being marked up significantly by carriers to cover themselves for a big shift in the market in oil. That's a conversation I'd like to have offline, to have a little bit more discussions to see what you have heard going forward and what we can learn in regards to freight with fuel. Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions out there? Frederick, I see you're on the call. Any thoughts that have come to your mind while you've been listening in to Steve? Well, let me unmute you here if I can. There you go. You're unmuted now.
Okay.
Hey, Frederick.
No, I like the overall, made a few notes here, as I was saying in our exchange of notes there yesterday, hoping to have a shipment from China in the next month or so. So we'll make sure you get a quote from that. Try you out on that side. And
Thank you.
we may have a large box that we have to send down to Quebec. I'll try you out for that too.
I appreciate that, Frederick. Fantastic,
You
Frederick.
sold me on the service. I just haven't tried the opportunity to try yet.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Well, we do work with a lot of companies that ship irregularly and whatnot, and that's something that we like to somewhat specialize in. We find opportunities with individuals that don't ship very often. So working with InXpress might be something that could be a good experience to provide you with a little bit of education in regards to how the industry works and whatnot, instead of just providing a shipment and a quote for you. So I would encourage you to ask lots of questions and get in touch, and I'll do the same.
So the others might like to know too.
Yeah.
Obviously, when you use InXpress, you're hiring you and Tom for your expertise. It's supposed to make things simpler.
Yep.
Weight off. Generally speaking, as a rule, or do you have a thumb that you're going to pay a little extra possibly for that service? Or do you find that generally, because you get better prices with the carriers, that your service in most cases is essentially free of what you would have to pay yourself?
I love that you asked that question. That's fantastic. The way that I look at that is I'm definitely not an individual or we're not a company that races to the bottom, right? Which is oftentimes what you need to do in any industry in order to win business. But what we believe, and what I believe, is that with a reduction in price, the service levels do go down for sure. What we've seen is we definitely do not win all the business that we get an opportunity, and we're not able to provide prices for everybody and every company out there. And it's something we've had to battle with for 2-3 years now. Although, we do also believe that there is service levels that are involved in, or that there is a little bit of a cost in providing some great service. With that being said, some of our carriers provide excellent rock solid rates where we can build our prices and our rates in a way where we're comfortable in what the margins are that we are receiving with providing excellent service as well. You know, some of them are a little bit, I mean, on the freight side these days, it's a little bit slimmer and trimmer, where your competitive rates are a little bit more difficult to provide the best service and trying to provide the best carrier. So I would say not every time we're going to be the cheapest, you know, but a lot of the time we will find rates that are going to be competitive, that will be, you know, that will make the customer happy and satisfied that they worked with us for sure. So it's about half and half for sure. I'm definitely not going to promise the lowest price every time, but I'm going to do everything I can to provide you the best price that I can, and that the market is able to provide to get your shipment to where it needs to go. And if you need to get in touch with me and deal with any sort of issue, that's going to come through our office instead of having to deal with it yourself with the carrier. So does that answer your question well, Frederick?
Expect to pay a little bit of a premium because you're buying expertise and saving time and aggravation. And that's got to be worth something to the businessman.
There you go. Fantastic. I love to hear that response.
Steve, a couple of questions came in over the chat. I don't know if you can see those.
Oh, I can.
Okay, maybe just maybe address those two questions real quick.
I will. Great questions. Thanks, Tom. Insurance, it is more important these days than in the past. Great point. Something that I mentioned very briefly, but didn't get into quite significantly, that insurance is always important for sure, and something that we do encourage for the price that you're going to pay for it. Typically, insurance, when you're working with most carriers, will range between, for a parcel, will range between $2.50 to $3.50 per $100 of value, which is, I would say, worth it for items that are valued very highly based on what happens in the industry. With that being said, DHL has a 97% success rate on their packages being delivered on time and effectively. Canada Post is 85 to 90%. They are a postal system for sure, and their network is a little bit more vast and their numbers aren't as high. FedEx and UPS hover between 90 and 95%. Although what happens to that 1 in 10 parcels that gets damaged or takes ages in order to get to where it needs to go? That's why I recommend insurance. With InXpress, we work with a third-party insurance provider that allows for 70 cents per $100 of value for insurance on parcels, which is great. Specifically on parcels, which is mostly what we do. That's how we provide our insurance. It's a lot more complex in the freight industry, and every carrier offers it a little bit differently, and so do we. So I won't comment on that too much because there's just too much to get into in regards to that. The next question I have here, ground versus air customs and border services, is a fantastic question. Do things move quicker through customs with air over ground? Absolutely 100%. I'll speak specifically from a DHL perspective and point of view. How DHL operates their customs is the clearance goal is to have that product pass customs before it even reaches the ground in the country that it's going to. So it's called wheels up clearance. So once the plane goes up in the air, the information gets sent to the country of the receiving country. DHL, acting as the importer of record, is able to clear those products themselves and process them before that plane lands in that country, so that when it lands, the parcels can get sorted. They will move through the system quickly and go out for delivery, hopefully either in the next day or two. In regards to ground, it is definitely more slower, and one of the things that would be the reasons why you pay less, because it's going ground, it's taking a little bit longer, and customs would delay your services. From my experience, when you're shipping ground from Canada to the US, for example, passing customs is challenging and causes delays. We've seen delays of up to a week or two without any other reason, based on the fact that parcels have to go to Vancouver, Calgary, Toronto, or Montreal before they cross over the border, which is a lot more complicated process and delays it even longer, in excess of the transit days that you're going to expect by crossing the border on a ground shipment. So it's very common that you could send a shipment to North Dakota from Winnipeg, and it might take you 5, 6, 7, 8 days, and there would have been customs delays and no other delays in the network. So I would recommend looking at opportunities for air when there is, when they don't have a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, which I would say most companies could not afford a 3-week delay, even if they're sending a parcel to an American customer that's, a gift, $100 e-commerce shipment takes 3 weeks. The customer's not going to be overly happy. You could maybe pay an extra $2, $3, $4, $5, $10, whatever it would be, and get an air shipment and get it there the next day. And the customer's very happy. Of course, that's not always possible because margins are very important and dollars are very slim, but that's my response to ground versus air customs services. A little bit biased. We don't do a lot of a lot of ground going to the US. For that reason, we veer away from it as much as we can. Thank you.
Great, Steve. I don't see any other questions, and we're sort of getting up to our time limit. So maybe on a closing statement here, we're going to have not only current launch members, but also future launch members who are likely going to check this out on our YouTube channel. So just tell these members one thing that they should ask you about next time they see you in launch. Maybe share why you guys use launch and your favorite thing about launch.
I love that, Jason. Thank you very much. I haven't been at launch as much these days based on the isolation regulations, but I go there often, 2, 3, 4 times a week when I work out and about, along with my 1 or 2 days a week in field prospecting. I enjoy it just because of the setup. It's lively, it's fun. There's lots of cool different businesses that you meet and individuals, and it's all about building relationships. So I'm not sure the exact number, but there's somewhere between, 170 to 200 members that Launch has, and they're all individual independent businesses or part of larger organizations that want their own space. So that's what I love about it. There's a basketball hoop, a little door basketball hoop that I shoot hoops on for 5 minutes at lunch. There's a little lunch table that you can have lunch with people at. There's gatherings about every week or two that, there's food and there's activities and whatnot. And you still have a lot of time to get your work done, but it's lively. It's interactive. It's exactly the place that I need to be with my personality. So that's what I love about Launch. And that's what I think is the best reason why it's a good place to be and get a membership.
Awesome. So, aside from people asking you questions about shipping, which you're clearly an expert at, what else do you like to chat about? Hockey, fishing, what's your passion that someone might be able to connect with you on?
Thanks, Jason. Well, my 2 passions, very simple and very easy because they're shut down at the moment, but travel and sports. I love sports and I love to travel. Unfortunately, can't do a lot of that right now. Specifically, I play with the Canadian men's Australian football team. For those of you who do or don't know that, I would encourage you to search it up. It's called AFL, and it's not rugby. So there's a little bit of a difference there. I love to play golf. I'm getting a membership this summer at likely Glendale over on the west side of the city where I live. And outdoorsy, hiking, camping. Doing all those different types of things is what I'm interested. So that's what I like to talk to people about: sports, travel, outdoorsy stuff, and small business, because that's the world that I live in.
Well, great, Steve. I appreciate you spending the time with us and all the members who are going to view this online. And again, look forward to seeing you in Launch next time. So with everyone on the phone, thanks so much for tuning in. Steve, any final comments before I let everyone go here?
That's it for now. Reach out to me on for whatever reason. I'd love to chat with you just about small business. I like connecting people. So if it's about shipping or not, it doesn't really matter. I'd love to hear about your business as well. Say hello and give me a call.
Great. Thanks so much, everyone.